Baruch Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Lamed Gimel, and we're going to start on the bottom of Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis around 10 lines from the bottom, where the Gemara is discussing if Tzar Ba'alei Chayim of causing pain to an animal is a biblical prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition. So the Gemara says, Tashma, we'll try and bring a proof for this question from the following source. Behemas Ovi Kochavim Umasol Yisrael. It says that, so basically we're discussing the case that a behemoth, the Bryce is talking about an animal of a non-Jew, and whereas the burden that the animal is carrying belongs to the Jew. And so what do we do under these circumstances? Is the chadalta. You're not allowed to, that normally you have to help people carry, but in this case you don't have to help. So the Gemara says, now, in this case, you don't have to help. If you're going to say that causing the pain to an animal is biblical, amai v'chadalta, azov ta'azov mi, by the way. Why are you allowed to refrain from helping? Under these circumstances, the animal is suffering, so you have to help. So it must be that it's biblical. So the Gemara says, this must be that it's rabbinic. So the Gemara says, no, olam tzar ba'alei chayim is dioraisa. Really, we would say that causing pain to the animal is a biblical prohibition. Hasam b'ti'ina, there it's referring to loading up the animal. Where it says, well, if that's the case, if it refers to loading up the animal, that's the case. Let's go to the next clause where it says, Behemas Yisrael Matzah Uvi Kochovim. It says, if it's the animal of a Jew and the burden of an idolater, Azov Tazov, you have to help. The Ibeti'ina, but if it's referring to loading up the animal, am I Azov Tazov? Why do you have to help? So the Gemara says, Mishum Tzara de Yisrael, because otherwise the Jew is going to be in pain. The Gemara says, Nami. Well, if that's the case, even the first clause, the Gemara says, Reisha b'chamar uvi kochavim, the seifa b'chamar Yisrael. No, the first clause is referring to, so the Gemara says the first clause is referring to the donkey driver was an idolater, and in the second clause, the donkey driver is a Jew. My pasakta, so why do you assume that if the animal belongs to an idolater, the donkey driver is an idolater? When it belongs to a Jew, the donkey driver is a Jew. So the Gemara says, as a basic law, the donkey driver follows the owner of the animal. Where it says, but those words you refrain and you have to help refer to prika, refer to unloading, not to loading. So the Gemara says, and we're on the bottom of 32b, 6 lines from the bottom. This refers to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who says Tzar Ba'alei Chayim Lav D'Oraisa, who says that this idea of Tzar Ba'alei Chayim, of causing pain to the animal, is not biblical. So the Gemara is still just addressing this question. We're 5 lines from the bottom on 32b, whether or not we say causing pain to an animal is a biblical prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition. So the Gemara says, let's learn it out from the following brisa. Oev lefrok. Let's say your friend who likes you asks you for help. The friend who you like asks you for help to unload the animal, the sone laton, and the person you don't like asks you to load up the animal. Mitzvah besone. So, of course, the Gemara says the mitzvah it's a mitzvah to first help the person who doesn't like you, or to overcome your will. If you want to say that causing pain to an animal is a biblical prohibition, you're better off unloading the Jew, because that's causing pain to the animal. The Gemara says, still, even though that's the case, it's more important to overcome your will. Another attempt, when it says in this case that you help the one you hate first to load up the animal, that refers to a Jew, but not an idolater. So the Gemara says, now, if you want to say causing pain to the animal is biblical, what do we care if it's an idolater or a Jew? You should help him unload it. You should help the Jew unload it. What do we care under those circumstances? So the Gemara says, "Mi savris asone dekrai." Do you think that the pasuk is discussing the sone mentioned in the pasuk that tells you to unload? No, asone de masnisinkai. It's discussing the sone mentioned in the brisa where it refers to loading up the animal, and so we can't bring a proof from it. So the Gemara is still trying to prove that Tzar Bar Chaim is not biblical. So Tashma, we're going to learn out from the fact on top of Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. It says rovates that you're supposed to help the animal that's lying down, the low raft sun, not that it always lies down. And not that it's and not one that is standing, tachas maso, under its burden, but not an animal that was unloaded and now we need to load it up. The Gemara is going to have to discuss what that means. Tachas maso, under its burden, masoy sheyachol ha'amod bo, a burden that it could stand. So it means to say you only have to help unload the animal if it's a typical burden that could stand. Now, the iyamr is tzar bar chaim de'oraisa. So if you want to say causing pain to an animal is a biblical prohibition, mali rovates, mali rabzan. What do we care if it was lying down or if it always lies down? Mali omate, and what do we care if it's standing? Either way, the animal's in pain. Gemara says, okay, we have to say Hamani. Again, same answer. This is Rabbi Yossi Aglili. This brisa follows Rabbi Yossi Aglili. He says, Tzar Bar Chaim is D'Rabbanan. It says, causing pain to the animal is rabbinic prohibition. Gemara says, Hachinami Mistabra. This is indeed logical because it says, Tachas Masoy Sheyachol HaModo. Only a burden. You only have to help the animal unload if it's a burden that it can withstand. Man Shamaslay. Who is the one who says, the Islay Haisfar? Who's the one who says this logic that you only have to help an animal if it's a typical burden? This is Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Shema Mina. So we see from here that this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili who says you only have to help an animal if you only have to unload the animal if it's a typical burden. When we march this mukmas like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, do we really want to establish this brisa like Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Vakatani Seifa Tachas Maso. It says at the end of the brisa that you have to unload its burden, v'lo meforak, but not one whose burden was already unloaded. Milo mefurak. What do you mean you don't have to help an animal who's already unloaded? If you mean to say that it's already unloaded completely, yeah, obviously you have to load up an animal. It means that you don't have to unload for free, but you have to load up the animal for a payment. And man shamaslay who's the one who says you get paid for loading up an animal? That's the Rabbanan. That's the rabbis who argue with Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So how can you say that the brisa is the position of Rabbi Yossi Aglili? So Gemara says, "Olam Rabbi Yossi Aglili." So you could say, no, the brisa is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And when it comes to loading up, they hold like the Rabbanan, then you get paid. And the Tzar Bar Chaim, he still argues. Gemara then finishes this discussion. Tana Rabbanan ki when you see an animal lying down, even from far away, you have to help them. When you come in contact. Now, if it means only when you encounter I mean, think you actually have to meet it. When you see. What is seeing that there is an encounter with? That's 1 in 7, 1/2 parts of a mil, which is a reese. So the Gemara basically it moved on. The Tzar Bar Chaim, we see that according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili is rabbinic, but the Gemara doesn't say for sure whether or not the Rabbanan say it's biblical or rabbinic or not. Tana Madado Imo Adpar. So let's say you help load up the animal, then you have to walk with it for a parsa. So to make sure that it doesn't fall off. And Amar Rabbi Barchana, but no tatzar. But the idea of walking with the animal, once you're walking with it, you could be paid for that. Okay, so now we have a sugya. The Gemara says, Avedas of Avedas Avid. Misha says, let's say you have the lost object and the lost object, your own lost object and the lost object of his father. Avedas Kodemis. He has to find his own lost object. He can find his own lost object before the lost object of his father. Avedas of Avedas Rabba. Shalo Kodim. Let's say it's a question of losing his own object or his Rebbe's. His Rebbe's comes first. Avedas Aviv Avedas Rabba. Let's say it's the object of his father and the object of his Rebbe. Who comes first, his father or his Rebbe? Sharabo Kodemis. His Rebbe comes before his father. Sha'aviv Eviu Olamazeh. His father brought him into this world. V'Rabba Shalimdo Chachma Eviu Chayim Abba. But his Rebbe who taught him wisdom brings him into the world to come. V'Im Aviv chacham, but if his father is wise, shel aviv kodemes, then his father comes first. Haya aviv v'rabo nosin masoi. Let's say both his father and his rebbe are carrying a burden. Miniach shel rabo v'achkach miniach shel aviv. And what he does is he first puts down his rebbe's, and then he puts down his father's. Haya aviv v'rabo v'beis hashevi. Let's say his father and his rebbe are in captivity. Podes rabo v'achkach podes aviv. First he rescues his father. First he rescues his rebbe and then his father. But if his father's wise, a scholar, and he's also a scholar, then under those circumstances, podes aviv achak podes rabbo. Then he first redeems his father and then his rebbe. Minan Emili, what's the source? I'm Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Amakra efes ki oya b'cha avyod. What's the source that you save your own before your father's? Because it says you will not be a poor amongst you. Shachal kodem l'shal kol adam, which teaches us that you have to be careful not to become poor, and so therefore yours comes before your father, or really any other man. And it says, even though that's the case, even though the Torah tells you that you could save yours before you save your father's, whoever does this, in the end, he's going to become poor. I mean, say, even though you're supposed to save yours before your father's, nevertheless, a person should act beyond the letter of the law, and therefore, if he's always going to look like this, then indeed he's going to need charity in the end. So let's say his father and his rebbe are carrying a burden, and you help your rebbe first. This rebbe they taught you about this. This is Rabba Shalom Do Chachma. This is the rebbe who taught you wisdom. Rabba Shalom Do Mikro Mishnah. Rashi says, what's Chachma? Logic, the reasoning, meaning of a higher learning, a higher level of learning. Not the Rebbe who just taught you verses and Mishnah. That's the position of Rebbe Meir. Yehuda says, Kol Sharov Chachma Soimenu. No, the one who most of his wisdom comes from him. Biosi Omer Afilu Ohi or Anav El Mishnah Achas. Even if he only taught him one Mishnah, that's his Rebbe. Amar Rava could go in Rav Schora, the Asbrin Zuamal Listeron. Like Rav Schora, who taught us the law of Zuamal Listeron. That's in Rashi says that's in Seder Taharos. And meaning to say, I didn't know what kind of vessel it was, and he taught us that it was a large spoon that you put the steam, the froth to the side, and that's the type of vessel he taught us about. Shmuel Karamane, Shmuel tore his garments, meaning to say it was his Rebbe, like a way a student's supposed to prepare for a Rebbe. Shmuel Karamane Ahume Merabanan de Asbrei. So Shmuel tore his garments on one of the Rabbanan who taught him this Mishnah Meseches Tamid, which refers to opaque text in Meseches Tamid that refers to the architecture of the Beis Hamikdash. And when somebody explained it, Shmuel said, "This person who taught it to me, he tore his garments for such a person as though he was his Rebbe Muvak." Amar Ula Talmidei Chacham shebeBavel Omdim Zem Nezev Korin Zel Zeh. They stand up, the Torah scholars in Babylon, what they do is they all stand for each other and they carry garments for each other. And even though they all treat each other as though they're their Rebbe, when it comes to returning a lost object, they only return it to the Rebbe who's their Rebbe Muvak, the one who's taught them the most of their wisdom. There's a lot of discussion of what does it mean to be a Rebbe Muvak, but it means the Rebbe who they spend most of they're learning from. So now we have a very sad story. Rav Chisda asked Rav Huna the question, let's say it's a Talmud v'tzarech l'rabo mai. Let's say it's a student and his teacher needs him. What do you mean his teacher needs him? Either the student brings prestige to the teacher, or else we're talking about a situation where the teacher himself needs to ask questions from the student. So what would be the law there? So when Rav Huna heard this question from his student Rav Chisda, he said, Chisda, what's your I don't need you, you need me. Adar Bain, meaning he was insulted, and he said, who do you think you are? Adar Bain Shana Ikbadi Adadi, for the next 40 years, basically, they didn't talk. They were upset at each other. They didn't go to visit each other. Yasser Rav Chisda, Arbain Tanita, Mishum Dechosh Daite de Rav Huna. So Rav Chisda came, and he sat and he did 40 fasts. He sat and did 40 fasts because he had caused Rav Huna to be upset. Yasa Rafuna Arbain Tanisa. Rafuna sat and did 40 fasts. Mishum Dechashte or Rav Chisda, because he had suspected Rav Chisda unfairly. Imar Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rav Yochanan Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Acha Bar Huna Amar Rav Sheshes Halacha Rabbi Yossi. The law is like Rabbi Yossi in the Brisa. So this is like the discussion between Rabbi Yehuda says whoever most of your wisdom is from. Rabbi Yossi says even if he only taught you one thing. Rabbi Yochanan Haki. Does Rabbi Yochanan really say the law is like Rabbi Yehuda, that the one who taught you most of your wisdom? Rabbi Yochanan Halacha Kastam Mishnah Tanan Rabba Shalim Do Chachma. Rabbi Yochanan says the law is like an anonymous Mishnah, and the anonymous Mishnah says the anonymous position is the one who taught him wisdom. My Chachma? No. That's what wisdom. What does wisdom mean? Rov Chachma, so the majority of his wisdom. Tana Rabbanan Ha'oskim B'Mikra Mida Ve'ena Mida. The one who teaches those who engage in study of the verses, they accomplish a measure, but not a measure. But Mishnah, Mida, V'noton Olam Tzlar. But if they study Mishnah, they accomplish a measure and they get reward for it. Gemara, Elocha Mida Gedola Mizu. Those who study Daf Yomi, they study the Gemara, there's nothing as great as it. But nevertheless, should run to study Mishnah more than Talmud. You should tell that to Benedict. Because it's so the Gemara says, but well, I don't understand this. Agufa kasha. It says itself a contradiction. Amris beGemara elchamida gedol mizu. You say by Gemara there's no greater measure. V'hadar amris u'om Mishnah yoser min Gemara. So which is it? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the top of Lam Gimon Beis. B'mei Rebbe nishnis Mishnah. No, Rebbe taught this Mishnah. What happened was Shafku Kul Yama Masnisim V'Azu Basar Gemara. So in the days of Rebbe, they taught this Mishnah that you should study Gemara more than Mishnah. And so then everybody was abandoning the Mishnah and running to the Gemara. Hadu Darshu Om Aviratzel Mishnah Yoser Ben Gemara. So his word, people were forgetting about Mishnah. So you say you should study Mishnah more. My Darosh. So when Rebbe said that studying Gemara is more important than Mishnah, what was his drasha? The Darsh of Yehuda Bar Ilai, he says, like when Yehuda Bar Ilai taught, he says, tell my nation their sins, or Beis Yaakov Chatosam, and Beis Yaakov their sins. Tell my nation their sins. This refers to Torah scholars, that their mistakes turn into purposeful sins. Or Beis Yaakov Chatosam. This refers to Elu Amaretz. This refers to the common people, not the Torah scholars, is donos naslam kishkagos, that their purposeful sins are considered like by Hashem like accidental sins. So if you're a Torah scholar, your accidental sin is considered like a purposeful sin. If you're an Amaretz, your purposeful sin is considered like an accidental sin. You don't know better, so therefore that's what it's considered. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda says, that's why you have to be so careful. If you are very careful to study Gemara, because then if you do it even accidentally, we're going to view it as though you did it purposely. Listen to the word of God, those who tremble for his words. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a Haredi? This refers to Torah scholars. Says, dear brothers, these refer to people who study the biblical verses. Sonachem, your enemies, Elubal and Mishnah. These are ones who study only Mishnah. They don't study the Talmud. They're called your enemies. Menadechem, those who cast you away. Eluame arts. These are the common people. So the pasuk is telling that all these people said that on account of me, you will be honored. Shema Tomar, maybe you'll say, Pasak Sivro Batal Sikum, that their hope is gone and their prospects are canceled. In the end, we will all see your joy. Shema Tomar Yisrael Yevoshu, that the Jews will be embarrassed. The idolaters will be embarrassed, but the Jews will rejoice. We will return to this chapter, this beautiful chapter of Elu Metzius. And the pasuk ends on the chapter ends on this note that the Jews who are lost will be returned. And the biggest Hashavas Aveda, the biggest return of a lost object, is the return of a neshama, the return of a soul. So now we're up to the next chapter, which is a beautiful chapter. This is the chapter about the Arba Shomrim, the four Shomrim. We know that the four Shomrim are Shomer Chinam, Shomer Sachar, Nos Yischar, and a Shoel. One who watches for free, one who's paid, the one who is a borrower, a Shoel, and the one who's a renter, Nose. So we see no star. So we see from here the following: Hamafkid. So we see from here. So we see from here the following. So somebody makes a deposit with his friend, a behema or kalim of an animal or utensils, benignavu osha avdu, and it's lost or it's stolen. Shilim l'shava. So he could swear. He is biblically. This is what's called a biblical oath. He has the ability to swear and not pay. Each of these shomrim has a different reason why they would be exempt. So let's say he says, I don't want to swear. He wants to pay. So then he pays and doesn't want to swear. Why? Parentheses. Sharayamnu, because they taught Shomer Chinam Nishba V'yotze. A person who's watching for free could take an oath and he doesn't have to pay. But let's say he pays, and then we find the robber, Nimtza Ganav, Shalom Teshum Mekefel. The robber pays double. Who does he pay it to? The person who stole and slaughtered a sheep or an ox pays 4 or 5 times the amount. To whom does he pay? Who does he pay this money to? To the one who had the deposit, i.e. to the shomer. Let's say the shomer takes an oath and he doesn't want to swear. And then nimtza ganef. And then we discover the robber. Then we pay double. If he slaughtered or sold it. So in this case, since he didn't swear, and so in this case, since he swore he didn't pay, who gets the money? The owner of the deposit. It says the Gemara, why do we have to say both an animal and utensils? Gemara says, we need to say both titana behema. If you said it just an animal, an animal you get double, because you have to do a lot of work watching the animal, bring it in, taking it out. But utensils, there's not a lot of work there. Maybe it doesn't pay double. So therefore, you have to say both. If we just say utensils, maybe by utensils he's giving him double. If he didn't take the oath and paid, because by kelim you never get more than double. Behema, but by an animal, there's a greater payoff. Maybe he wouldn't pay double. So therefore you need both. Okay, I mean that's today's daf. I did it a little quickly.